In the quiet hum of production lines during the mid-1990s, the Denver Mint was working at full capacity. The Roosevelt dime, a staple of American pocket change since 1946, rolled through presses in massive numbers. The year 1994 was no different. Millions of these small but essential coins were struck, each bearing the familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. Everything about the process was routine, mechanical, and precise. At least, it was supposed to be. Somewhere in that blur of steel dies and high-speed presses, a subtle anomaly slipped past quality control, unnoticed at first, its significance buried under the avalanche of ordinary dimes. The Denver Mint's D mark sat just below the date, as it had for decades, but something was different, something almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Years later, far from the mechanical heartbeat of the minting floor, a seasoned coin collector sat at his desk under the warm glow of a desk lamp. His collection was meticulous, each coin housed in protective holders, labeled, cataloged. He had handled thousands of dimes before, but a small batch of 1994 D pieces had recently come his way from a coin roll hunt. At first glance, they appeared ordinary, but his instinct told him to slow down. Years of experience had taught him that the smallest irregularity could change everything. He tilted one coin under the light, tracing the smooth rim with his finger. Something caught, an imperfection, a faint distortion in the way the date sat in relation to the mint mark. He leaned closer, magnifier in hand, and his breath slowed. This was no ordinary dime. The surface of the coin revealed a minting error, one that should never have left the Denver Mint. The D mint mark seemed misplaced, slightly off-center from its intended position. To the casual eye, it was nothing. To a trained collector, it was a whisper from the past, evidence of a flawed die that somehow survived long enough to strike multiple coins. Even more intriguing, faint doubling in the date and parts of the lettering hinted at a misalignment during the striking process. He knew instantly that this combination wasn't just rare. It was potentially one of those elusive errors that sent ripples through the numismatic community. His pulse quickened, not from greed, but from the sheer thrill of discovery he didn't tell anyone at first. These things required patience. Word travels fast among collectors, and premature excitement could draw out competition before he understood what he truly had. He spent nights combing through references, matching his coin against known varieties. But this exact alignment and doubling, didn't appear in any major catalog. That was when he knew the odds were in his favor. Meanwhile, out in the wider collecting world, prices for Roosevelt dimes had been fairly stable for decades. Common dates were worth only their face value, maybe a few cents more in pristine, uncirculated condition. Errors could change that, but only if they were dramatic enough to capture collector interest. He began tracking auction records, watching how coins with smaller, lesser-known errors slowly climbed in value. The market was unpredictable, like a tide that rose and fell with changing trends, but he saw a pattern. Certain mint errors, especially ones tied to known mints and with clear, visual anomalies, could surge in demand almost overnight. The more he researched, the more the timeline of his coin's life took shape. Somewhere in 1994, perhaps early in the production run, a die at the Denver Mint had developed a subtle shift. Whether it was due to wear, improper installation, or a rare mechanical glitch, it created coins where the mint mark and date alignment were just slightly off, accompanied by a ghostly doubling effect. Most likely, the error wasn't spotted immediately because it wasn't glaring. Unlike a dramatic off-center strike or a missing design element, this one hid in plain sight, traveling through pockets, vending machines, and bank deposits for years. He began discreetly sharing photos with a few trusted collectors, careful to crop images so only the error's essence was visible, keeping the full identity of his find under wraps. Responses ranged from polite curiosity to subtle envy. One seasoned dealer hinted that if authentic, it could rival some of the most sought-after modern dime errors in terms of rarity. The collector felt the tension building, like holding a secret that could alter his standing in the collecting world as time passed. The market began to shift in ways he couldn't have predicted. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, error coins started drawing more attention thanks to online auction platforms. What once required traveling to conventions and bidding in crowded rooms could now be done from a home office with a few keystrokes. Prices for dramatic errors spiked, but so did the hunt for subtle ones. His coin sat quietly in its protective case, appreciating in value not because of inflation alone, but because collectors were beginning to appreciate nuances. Tiny flaws that once went ignored were now desirable markers of minting history. Then came the moment of testing the waters. He decided to send the coin to a reputable grading service, knowing full well the suspense of waiting for the results could be as agonizing as the process itself. Weeks later, the package returned, sealed with the coin inside a slab and a label confirming what he had suspected. 1994 D Roosevelt dime. Mint mark misplacement and light date doubling, error. Seeing it in writing was a validation years in the making, but the twist came not from the grading confirmation, but from a conversation that followed. A fellow collector, upon hearing the specifics, revealed that he had found a similar coin. Same year, same mint mark misplacement, but has had an additional anomaly, a faint clash mark from the reverse design appearing on the obverse field. This raised a possibility neither of them had considered before, that there might have been multiple stages of error from the same faulty die setup. If true, it meant there could be a small family of related error coins out there, each slightly different, but tied to the same moment in the Denver Mint's history. The collector realized that his find wasn't just a singular rarity. It could be part of a broader, almost story-like sequence of minting mistakes, each with its own tale to tell. This revelation added a layer of intrigue. If multiple variants existed, collectors might seek to assemble a complete set, driving demand for each one higher. His coin's value wasn't just about its own rarity anymore. It was about its place in a bigger puzzle. Auctions for certain modern dime errors were already hitting the thousands, and with the right exposure, his piece could enter that realm. Yet he hesitated. Sometimes, the journey of owning such a coin outweighed the lure of selling it. In the months that followed, whispers of other examples began surfacing in online forums, but they were inconsistent. Some were genuine, others were wishful thinking, with ordinary were mistaken for mint errors. This uncertainty only fueled the mystery. The collector watched as speculative prices bounced around. Some sellers asked outrageous sums, others undersold their finds out of ignorance. He knew that patience could be the difference between a respectable profit and a historic sale. His own attachment to the coin deepened as he considered its improbable survival. How many times had it passed unnoticed from hand to hand before landing in his possession? How many others had been lost to the churn of circulation, worn down until the error became invisible? It was a survivor in more ways than one. A sliver of metal carrying an imprint of human error, mechanical imperfection, at a moment in time that could never be replicated. The value trajectory was impossible to ignore. What had once been worth a dime was now, in certain circles, considered worth hundreds, possibly more if marketed correctly. Some auction watchers speculated that if a complete sequence of related 1994 D errors were documented, the series could command four-figure sums per coin. The collector began documenting his find meticulously, photographing it under varied lighting, noting every minute detail, every contour of the double numerals, every subtle shift in the mint mark's placement. This was no longer just ownership, it was stewardship. Still, the coin story refused to settle into predictability. Just as he contemplated bringing it to a major auction house, another twist emerged. A numismatic researcher contacted him with archival notes suggesting that in early 1994, the Denver Mint experienced an unusual mechanical failure in one of its dime presses, resulting in temporary but repeated alignment issues. This failure was quietly fixed, and no official record was made public. If true, it meant his coin wasn't just a lucky fluke. It was a tangible artifact of an unrecorded chapter in U.S. mint history. That knowledge shifted everything. Suddenly, the dime wasn't merely a curiosity. It was a witness to a behind-the-scenes event no one had fully documented. The collector found himself at a crossroads. Release the story now and cement his coin's place in numismatic lore, or hold it longer, letting the legend grow in the shadows until the right moment. In the end, the decision wasn't about money alone. It was about the kind of legacy he wanted the coin to carry. Every detail, from the slight cant of the mint mark to the faint doubling in the date, was a reminder that even in an age of precision, imperfection could slip through, carrying with it a mystery that might never be fully solved. And somewhere out there, in pockets, jars, and forgotten drawers, perhaps a few more of its silent siblings still waited to be found, their stories yet to be told. In 1987, the Denver Mint was deep in the rhythm of its coin production schedule. striking millions of dimes to feed into the endless stream of commerce. The Roosevelt dime had been in circulation for over 4 decades by then, its design a constant fixture in American pockets. Franklin D. Roosevelt's familiar profile remained crisp and dignified on the obverse, the torch and branches on the reverse unchanged since 1946. In Denver, presses worked at relentless speed, their movements measured in fractions of a second, each strike producing another piece of pocket change destined to vanish into the anonymity of daily transactions. Yet even in this era of advanced machinery and strict quality control, the human and mechanical elements of the minting process could not guarantee absolute perfection. Somewhere in that year's production run, a deviation slipped through, small enough to escape detection at first, yet significant enough to become the center of intrigue for collectors decades later. For a long time, that coin traveled unnoticed. It might have clinked in cash registers, been fed into vending machines, or sat at the bottom of a jar in someone's kitchen. It was ordinary in the eyes of everyone who handled it, until it found its way into the hands of someone who saw coins differently. A collector, experienced in the subtle language of numismatic detail, sat at his desk late one evening with a fresh batch of circulated dimes from a local bank. He wasn't looking for anything from 1987 in particular, but habits built over years had taught him that every roll had the potential to hide a story. He broke the paper seal on one roll, letting the coin spill into a neat pile under the glow of his lamp. The method was automatic. Quick glances for obvious anomalies, followed by a more careful inspection of anything that seemed unusual. It was a single coin, its surface glinting in a slightly different way that caused him to pause. The mint mark caught his attention first. The D was faint, not absent, but struck in such a way that it seemed off-centered and weak compared to standard examples. He tilted it, watching the way light revealed the shallow depth of the mark. This was no case of wear. The irregularity was too clean, too consistent with a minting mishap rather than post-circulation damage. The obverse revealed more. Roosevelt's profile showed signs of light doubling, most noticeable along the nose and mouth, with a shadow-like ridge following the contours. The word liberty had a similar effect, the letters seeming to echo themselves just enough to draw suspicion from trained eye. On the reverse, the edges of the torch's flame and parts of the oak leaf showed faint distortion. It was subtle, but unmistakable to someone who knew the difference between a circulation scrape and a double die. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a single error type. It might be a convergence of multiple anomalies that he didn't announce the find. In the world of coin collecting, revelations came only after verification. Instead, he began the slow process of comparison, pulling out standard 1987 D dimes from his collection and placing them side by side under magnification. The differences were undeniable. The mint mark on his newly found piece sat fractionally lower and was less sharply defined, while the doubling, though light, was consistent in multiple areas, an indicator that the error had occurred at the die stage rather than from damage after minting that he spent days researching, combing through error coin references and online archives. There were mentions of minor 1987 D anomalies, but none with the exact combination his coin displayed. The scarcity of matching examples suggested one of two possibilities. Either the error was so subtle most had been overlooked, or so few had been struck that its survival in circulation was a rarity in itself. Both scenarios hinted at value, though it was too early to know how much. The next step was authentication. He submitted the dime to a professional grading service, packaging it carefully and sending it off with the patient anxiety of someone entrusting a potential treasure to the mail. Weeks passed. Each day's mail delivery carried a small measure of anticipation. When the package finally returned, the slab inside confirmed his hopes. The label read, 1987 D Roosevelt dime. Misplaced mint mark, light double die obverse, reverse distortion error. It was official. His instincts had been right. But just as he began to think of it as a singular piece, a conversation with another collector shifted the narrative. This acquaintance, upon hearing the specifics, mentioned having a 1987 D dime with a partial collar error, where the planchet had not been fully seated during striking, creating a slightly raised rim on one edge. When they compared notes, they realized the two coins might have been products of the same general period of press issues at the Denver Mint. The possibility emerged that multiple minor errors had occurred close together in time, each different, but perhaps linked by a mechanical fault that went unreported. This revelation transformed his view of the coin's place in numismatic history. It wasn't just a lucky fluke. It might be part of a small, undocumented group of related 1987 anomalies. If other examples could be found, even with different manifestations of error, they might collectively form a sought-after subset for specialized collectors. The potential for building a story around such a group could drive demand higher than the value of any single piece. Meanwhile, the broader market for error coins was in flux. In the late 1980s and 1990s, many minor errors had gone unnoticed or been dismissed as curiosities. By the 2000s, with the rise of online marketplaces, awareness and competition grew rapidly. Coins that once sold for a modest premium began fetching significant sums when well documented and authenticated. He monitored auction records, noting that Roosevelt dimes with clear, visible minting errors, especially from Denver, had been steadily increasing in price, particularly those with multiple anomalies on a single coin, that he resisted the temptation to sell quickly. The allure of immediate profit was outweighed by the sense that the coin's value might not yet have peaked. Each year brought more collectors into the market, more education about subtle mint errors, and more appreciation for coins that told a deeper story than their face value implied. He stored it in a protective case, revisiting it from time to time, both to admire its details and to remind himself of the night he found it. Then came the unexpected twist. While digging through archived mint reports from 1987, he stumbled upon a passing reference to die maintenance irregularities at the Denver facility during the spring of that year. The note was vague, offering no specifics, but the timing aligned with when his coin might have been struck. If this was the root cause, it meant that the errors were not random, but the result of a known, if quietly managed, production issue. The mint, as was often the case, had corrected the problem swiftly, which explained the scarcity of such pieces. Armed with this knowledge, he began to see the coin not just as a numismatic oddity, but as a fragment of an untold story in minting history. The weak, skewed mint marks spoke of a die that had not been properly aligned. The light doubling hinted at a momentary shift in the die's positioning. The reverse distortion suggested the planchet might have been fractionally misaligned during the strike. Each flaw was a breadcrumb, pointing back to a fleeting mechanical imperfection in an otherwise flawless production run. The market for such coins was driven as much by narrative as by rarity. He knew that if the story of the 1987 anomalies were pieced together and shared with the collecting community, it could ignite interest beyond the narrow circle of error specialists. The thought of sparking that kind of attention was tempting, but so was the quiet satisfaction of holding a piece whose full value, historical, monetary, and personal, was still unfolding. Through the years, he watched prices for similar multi-era Roosevelt dimes rise, sometimes doubling in a matter of months when a new auction record was set. His own coin remained untouched in its slab, its label a silent testament to a convergence of rare minting circumstances. It had traveled through countless hands without anyone noticing its quiet defiance of perfection, until it reached someone who could see its story etched in metal. And somewhere, he suspected, there were others like it, resting in change jars, slipping unnoticed through cash registers, each carrying the same small echoes of a moment in Denver's minting history when the machinery faltered just enough to let a mistake pass into the world. In 2003, the Denver Mint was a well-oiled machine, producing millions of coins each day to meet the country's demand for circulating currency. The Roosevelt dime, unchanged in its basic design since 1946, was a small but enduring part of that output. Franklin D. Roosevelt's dignified profile still dominated the obverse. A torch flanked by olive and oak branches still adorned the reverse, and the familiar D. mint mark signaled its Denver origin. Nothing about the year promised anything unusual. The nation was in the midst of an era where coin production had largely been perfected by modern technology, and mistakes were rare enough to be considered remarkable when they slipped through. But even in the precision-driven environment of the early 21st century, a small deviation in the process could leave an indelible mark, unnoticed at first, waiting quietly for someone with the right eye to spot it. A seasoned collector sat at his work table late one evening, sifting through rolls of pocket change he had purchased from a local bank. It was a ritual as familiar to him as breathing. The rhythmic clink of coins against the tabletop had accompanied him through countless evenings of careful searching. He had learned long ago that the rarest finds often appeared when least expected. He was halfway through a roll of dimes when a coin caught his attention. not because of anything obvious, but because of a subtle whisper of difference in the way light glanced off its surface. He paused, holding it under the desk lamp, his eyes narrowing in concentration. The D mint mark seemed off, not dramatically misplaced, but slightly skewed from where it should rest in relation to the date. A magnifying glass confirmed his suspicion. It wasn't just a mint mark. There was a faint doubling in some of the obverse lettering, particularly in the Liberty and parts of Roosevelt's profile. To an untrained observer, it might have looked like wear, but he recognized the crisp, distinct lines that set a true double die apart from circulation damage. His fingers tingled with the possibility that he had handled 2003 D. Roosevelt dimes before, thousands of them, but this was different. The more he examined it, the more details emerged. The rim on one side was slightly thinner than the other, suggesting a minor misalignment during striking. On the reverse, the lines of the torch's handle and the surrounding branches were subtly distorted, as though the die and planchet hadn't met in perfect harmony. The imperfections were small, but in numismatics, small could be everything that he didn't speak of the discovery immediately. The world of coin collecting was one where whispers traveled quickly, and unverified excitement could cause a stir before the facts were in place. Instead, he began his private research. He combed through error coin databases, auction records, and collector forum archives, looking for any mention of a similar 2003 D dime. A few postings referenced minor anomalies from that year, but nothing matched the exact combination of mint mark skew, doubling, and misalignment that his coin displayed. That was when the possibility began to form in his mind. This could be unlisted, undocumented. If true, it would not only increase its rarity, but also place it in the category of errors that often fetch surprisingly high prices in the right auction setting. Still, he kept his excitement in check. The coin had to be authenticated before any real conclusions could be drawn. Meanwhile, the broader coin market was shifting. Error coins, once considered the domain of niche specialists, were gaining mainstream attention thanks to online marketplaces. Social media groups were buzzing with stories of ordinary people discovering valuable oddities in their change. Prices for mint errors fluctuated wildly, often driven by sudden bursts of publicity. He watched these trends closely, noting how coins with less dramatic errors than his sometimes sold for hundreds of dollars, while others, equally rare, went unnoticed for years. The grading process was the next step. Sending the dime to a professional service meant waiting, and waiting meant weeks of anticipation. When the coin returned, sealed in its protective slab, the label confirmed what he had hoped. 2003 D. Roosevelt dime. Misplaced mint mark and double die. Strike misalignment. Error. The words carried a weight that only someone deeply immersed in numismatics could fully appreciate. It wasn't just an error. It was a convergence of multiple striking anomalies in a single coin, each one adding a layer to its rarity. But the story didn't end there. While discussing the find with another collector, he learned of a similar 2003 D dime that had surfaced in a different state. That coin shared the misplaced mint mark, but had a reverse die clash, an imprint of design element from one side faintly visible on the other. This opened an intriguing possibility. The Denver Mint in 2003 might have experienced a series of subtle but related die issues affecting Roosevelt dime production. If enough of these coins could be documented, they could form a rare and highly desirable subset of the series. The idea fascinated him. Instead of simply owning a rare error coin, he might be holding a key piece in a small but significant minting event, one that collectors in the future might refer to as a distinct anomaly in U.S. coinage history. The thought of it being part of a narrative bigger than itself made him consider keeping it even longer, letting its reputation grow before ever placing it for sale. Over time, he saw the market's appetite for such errors strengthen. Coins with clear, well-documented minting anomalies, even for modern years, were commanding higher prices than before. He tracked sales of similar Roosevelt dime errors from other years, noting that those with multiple error types on a single coin tended to multiply in value faster than single anomaly pieces. His 2003 D had 3 distinct errors. The potential was undeniable, yet the coin's journey was not without uncertainty. Some collectors dismissed minor mint mark shifts as insignificant. Others questioned the market's willingness to pay a premium for modern coins unless the errors were spectacular. But he knew from experience that value is often as much about story as it was about the physical coin. This dime's story, emerging from a time when precision was expected to be flawless, surviving undetected through the years, combining several anomalies into one, was a compelling one. Months turned into years, and he continued to monitor chatter among error collectors. A few more 2003 D anomalies appeared, but none perfectly matched his. Each time he saw another coin from that year, he compared it against his own, quietly reassured of its uniqueness. Its value was slowly building, not in sudden leaps, but in a steady climb as awareness of modern mint errors grew. The unexpected twist came when he stumbled upon a Denver Mint production report from 2003 buried in an online archive. It referenced a temporary mechanical irregularity affecting certain coin presses that year, an issue resolved quickly and without major disruption. No details were given, but to him, it was confirmation. This wasn't random. The errors, his included, were the silent byproducts of that irregularity, a brief moment when the mint's otherwise flawless machinery faltered. Knowing this added a new dimension to his coin's significance. It wasn't just a product of chance. It was a surviving witness to a fleeting mechanical failure that the public never knew about. The fact that the mint had resolved the issue so swiftly meant only a small number of such coins could exist, scattered across the country in pockets, drawers, and bankrolls, most likely unnoticed. He thought about the journey it had taken to reach him. How many transactions had it passed through? How many people had handled it without realizing its hidden value? And how many more of its kind were still out there, quietly slipping through everyday commerce, waiting for someone to notice the way the light fell differently on their surfaces? The coin remained in his collection, not because he doubted its market worth, but because every time he looked at it, he felt that same pulse of discovery he had felt the night he first spotted it under his desk lamp. Its thinly skewed mint mark, the doubling in Roosevelt's profile, the uneven rim, all whispered a story from a single year in Denver's minting history, a story that might never be told in full, but one that lived on in a dime that most would overlook in the palm of their hand.